let's say that your upper management has approved your increase in budget to put towards employee wages, but they want to see the evidence that it has impact on the company's ROI. Fair enough, but what findings do you need to present? Today, Brenda Gilchrist and I will cover how to prove the impact of competitive wages on employee morale, productivity, and retention to leadership in order to achieve and finalize that permanent buy-in. Let's get into it. For this next part, I want to talk about how to prove the impact of competitive wages to leadership. So thinking, maybe you get a little bit more budget to test the waters here, or maybe leadership is saying, hey, okay, let's see what you got and see what happens. So my first slide I do want to point to, or my third slide, I should say, talking a little bit about the impact of increased compensation, competitive compensation. So this is a couple quotes from Business Leadership Today. This first one on the top left, talking about recent research by Harvard University revealed that increasing pay among warehouse workers by just $1 per hour resulted in a 2.1 or 2.8 retention boost. Results also showed that every dollar per hour paid lost caused a 28% increase in turnover. This quote on the right talking about, according to a report by Lattice, compensation is a main driver of employee turnover, with 55% of employees quitting to take jobs with higher compensation. And this last quote on the very bottom here, when employees' needs are met, they are more likely to stay with an organization. Again, talking about that loyalty, being well compensated through pay, benefits, and other employee perks for the work they do motivates employees to do their work well. So my question for you, Brenda, is how does increased compensation feed into employee morale, productivity, and retention?
Right. And I think this actually starts to get into a little bit of the what I call pay at risk or bonuses, the variable pay factors. We haven't really talked a lot about that yet, but one of the ways to impact the competitive compensation is looking at, is there any opportunity for positions to give them a piece of the pie, to say, we want you to feel this entrepreneurial spirit, or we want you to feel that your extra effort, your hard work, and your dedication to the organization, that there's some level of bonus or variable pay that goes into that. So I think that gives employees, if you define it correctly for them, they'll know that if I do X, or if I work at a level of certain quality standards or meet certain quality standards, then I can get Y. And that, X and Y, the Y is the bonus at the end of the year, maybe, and it might be a gain sharing program. It might be, an additional match that goes into their 401k. It can be tied to just overall business meeting its revenue goals for the year. And that's where that gain sharing is. If we meet the revenue goals, everybody wins and everyone gets a certain percentage. And then certain positions that, for example, sales positions are classic, but certain positions that do have an impact individually on how much revenue is produced, or even how much we save, can be some factors in whether or not we can share a portion of the organization's overall, revenue goals. How much can we share that with the organization? But defining that and making employees excited about it, and knowing exactly how they can impact the end of the year, or the quarterly bonuses, or the variable pay above and beyond just their basic pay. I think it's important to get them excited about it and get them to understand, well, how do I impact that? And what does that look like? And get them involved.
I love the aspect of variable pay. I think that's a really great call. And honestly, even kind of tangent to this topic here, if we're talking about recruiting, right? I think saying, hey, this is our pay. We also offer this variable pay here, whether that's a bonus, benefit package, whatever it might be. But that really will make ears perk up, because again, even if your pay is on the lower end of the market, or it's not as competitive as, the big box retail store across the street, anything like that, they say, hey, this is something that I'm going to have a lot more pull in. I'm going to be able to get promotions here. I'm going to be able to get this variable pay, whatever it is. So I think that's such a great point. What methods or metrics have you found most effective in quantifying the impact of competitive wages? I also really want to emphasize the quantifying aspect here, because I think HR really struggles with getting those hard numbers, those data-driven points kind of in their pocket to, again, showcase to leadership.
Right. I mean, I think this is where you get into compensation studies, salary surveys, and even if you are a solo HR practitioner, you can still look at data and you can show that to the, manager, the CFO, the executive, to say, here's where we're at. This isn't about me, the HR person. This is about you and your organization. Here's where you're at. And sometimes, the salary survey data, it's a little bit of a art and science. It might not be exact, but at least if you blend a few of these survey data points for a position, and you can argue that your position was accurately matched, and the job analysis, the job description's clear, it's defined, and you matched it appropriately, and you can argue it to the C-suite, this is what I found, and the data doesn't lie. So you have to show that variance, that if we don't do something, you're going to possibly lose this person to the market. So that's your call, and you put it on them, because it's not HR's fault. You don't have to be carrying the water for the executives for poor decisions, but give them the data, show them the analysis, make the argument, say, in my opinion, I think we need to do a wage increase of 5% with a variable pay of, let's say, 10% based on 5% individual goals and 5% on meeting our overall revenue targets. And boom, you got the formula to hopefully retaining that person or attracting that person. But you have to be able to make that argument with some good data. And again, the data typically doesn't lie. And I think that a CFO and an operations person, they're going to resonate with data. So I think leverage that as much as you can.
Absolutely. We have a client called Slap and Pickle. They're a burger restaurant, and I believe they're around 50 to 60 staff, somewhere around there. And their CEO, James, he actually, before Workforce, he was kind of scattered throughout a lot of different systems. He had the Excel spreadsheet, he was texting, emailing, data points just non-existent, right? And it wasn't until they actually started using Workforce, it was kind of an added benefit for them. They didn't even realize the amount of data that we were acquiring for them. His manager, one of his, frontline managers, actually came up to him with like all these data points saying, hey, we're seeing a lot of unauthorized overtime. We're seeing, a lot of, sales labor dollars not being spent very well. Let's fix that. And he came to James, this manager came up to James with all these data points, and they changed so much. They ended up saving a ton on labor dollars spent, their ROI increased, all that good stuff. But yeah, I think it's such a great point talking about C-suite. Oftentimes CEO, CFO, COO speak language and numbers. Until they see those data points, it's often not known how much is being spent or how much, is being wasted, maybe in some aspects, like unauthorized overtime in this case. So I think that's such a great point.
Now, let me add to that too, and I'll piggyback. That story, to me, what that means is they looked at their overall staffing, did a staffing analysis. So when we go in and do HR optimization, we're looking at the staffing design. And sometimes we'll see, gosh, you have a lot of people that are managing, but not a lot of people that are actually doing the day-to-day job. So let's eliminate some of these manager positions that really aren't adding too much to the overall outcomes. Or we might find that they've really inflated positions. So we might, in one organization, we saw someone hire a CIO for a very small company. And we said, what our recommendation would be is eliminate the CIO and replace it with, it was 4 positions with actual hands-on technical positions in the IT department versus having a very high price CIO for the organization. So it's looking at that. I love that manager did that for, it was a burger company, you said?
Exactly. Yeah, I know. It's so great. And even, talking about getting those differentiating factors between, even locations, right? I think Slap and Pickle has 2 locations. So they are actually able to see with their live insights, all right, which location is doing better in terms of labor dollar expenditure and ROI. They are actually able to look in their staff count and say, all right, maybe we don't need this many people at this location because the customer demand isn't as crazy as location A, let's say.
Right.
So really interesting. And yeah, and having that information and, being able to kind of outsource it to a software system instead of having a CIO maybe on board and having a whole job dedicated to it, complete savings right there for sure.
Right.
Awesome. What does the ROI of investing in competitive wages look like, would you say?
Well, I think that, if you invest in competitive wages, you're going to get you're going to get better talent typically. And then you're going to see the outcomes like we talked about, quality outcomes. You'll see that there's better workflow processes in place. Because if you have people that are paid a little bit more competitive, or you maybe even leading the market, they're probably going to bring to the table a little higher level of skills that are going to really set you apart as a organization or a company. But we have to be realistic. What can we really afford to do? And then look at what is the outcomes of this position? How are they helping support the organization? And then reassessing that. So I would say look at your ROI and your wages at least biannually. We look at, have you looked at this for a while? Have you looked at the pay rates? Have you looked at the positions for a while? Are they still aligned with meeting those business outcomes? So it's an ongoing process. You can't just do a one and done comp survey or compensation survey and hire people and be done with it. But it's always looking at, is that still the right formula with pay and the type of people, the type of positions that you have?
For sure. I think that's a great point. I always like to close out our webinars with this last question for you, Brenda. What are one or two top tips, actions, or takeaways that our audience can leave with to garner buy-in from leadership to increase wages?
Well, I think, just recapping, I think that the top three things is make sure you do a very good job at the job analysis and the job descriptions, looking at what are those types of positions that you need. Two is evaluating the market. What do you need to pay competitively at a baseline? And then looking at working with your CFO and operations to see if there's any other opportunities for, the variable pay or the bonuses or some gain sharing programs. I think that those are going to be the top three options for HR people to look at operations and compensation and people and align it all together to create a really good program that's going to work to move the needle at the organization, meet goals, and engage employees and keep them satisfied and retained.
Thank you so much for watching that segment from our webinar on how solo HR managers can get buy-in to increase wages. If you'd like to watch the full webinar, click this video here and be sure to subscribe for more content like this.